Now, as you know, we live in an era of woke. Don't we just see that in all these anti-Israel protests now? All these protesters dressing up like Palestinians and protesting effectively on the side of Islamic militants who have decided are they oppressed because of their skin colour and the fact they're poor. You know, someone must have oppressed them. So, I mean, the whole thing's a joke. Woke politics, of course, is worst in our universities. That's where, with their whiteness studies and their pronouns and all this kind of stuff. But it's actually a fight back. Professor Eric Kaufmann last year quit as a professor of politics at the University of London after years of harassment for criticising woke politics. He moved instead to the University of Buckingham to, among other things, start the first course studying woke politics. And last week he published his newest book, The Third Awakening, it's called, a 12-point plan for rolling back progressive extremism. Professor Kaufmann joins me now. Professor Eric Kaufmann, thank you so much for your time. First, can you tell us, how do you define woke?
The simple one-sentence definition is the making sacred of historically marginalized race, gender, and sexual identity groups. So that's the sentence definition. What follows from making those groups sacred is that you cannot offend even the most sensitive member of such a group. And if you do, you've transgressed the sacred and you must be excommunicated or canceled. So the kind of fuzzy philosophy that emerges from making those groups sacred is this idea that we must have perfect equality of outcomes, so no race or gender gaps, for example, in the boardroom, and we must have perfect emotional harm protection for these groups. So that means, again, any speech which could be construed as insensitive in any way must be censored. And that's really what brings us to cancel culture.
Can you explain to me one interesting development of the whole woke movement? Why is being anti-Israel now so woke? How come that's become the woke cause of the day?
Well, because race is sacred, the white, particularly white male, is the fallen, if you like, has the lowest number of oppression points. Black or indigenous has the highest number of oppression points. That creates a lens on the world, a lens of white oppressor and minority, indigenous oppressed, white colonizer, settler versus minority, powerless, indigenous, innocent. Now, you take that lens as applied to a country like Canada, the US, or Australia, or Britain with its empire. You take that same kind of racial lens, black versus white. You apply it then into Israel, where, of course, it's a much more complicated situation, but they simplify that into there's a white settler colonizer, which is the Jews, and then there is the indigenous colonized people of color, which is the Palestinians. So they've kind of transposed this woke framework around the sacredness of race to that conflict and imposed an incredibly simplifying lens. And that's really what's energizing them. You know, so if both of these groups were unambiguously, you know, if we were talking about Yemen or China, even if the West was supporting one side, it just wouldn't have the same pickup because it doesn't easily fit that narrative of white oppressor of people of color. And that's really where I think the energy and the fire comes from for the left on this.
I think you're really telling us too that just trying to argue back in terms of, no, you've got your history wrong about Israel, or you've got your demographics about the Jews in Israel wrong. It doesn't work. This is not about reason. This is about good or bad, and they need, in fact, the Israel to be seen in that prism. Otherwise, it simply doesn't work for them. Now, to me, this is one of the great dangers of wokedom, that it takes us out of reason and into the into the arena of force and intimidation. Your book, 12-Point Plan to Wind This Back, is the subtitle. What are some of your best ideas to winding this back?
Well, what I argue is, first of all, young people are twice as woke, at least, much less tolerant compared to older people. Young leftists are much less tolerant compared to older leftists. I'll give you a couple of examples. If you take the United States, young people split roughly evenly between supporting Hamas and supporting Israel. In Britain, young people under 25 are roughly split over whether J.K. Rowling should be dropped by her publisher, whereas anyone over 45, it's low single digits who believe that. So we have to get at the education system, and in particular, the school system. And that means conservative governments are going to really have to focus a lot more seriously on reform of the curriculum and getting woke indoctrination out of the schools.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's terrific advice, and one would hope to be taken up by governments here. Thank you so much indeed for your time.